Elliot Chambers was a billionaire with a deep love for collecting beautiful, rare properties. His vast collection of mansions, estates, and penthouses made him one of the wealthiest men in the country. But it wasn't just the luxury that excited him. It was the thrill of finding something unique, something no one else had. And one day, he stumbled upon the most mysterious property of them all. It started one rainy afternoon when Elliot was browsing through online property listings. He came across a house unlike any other, a massive Victorian mansion sitting at the edge of a forgotten town. Hidden behind thick, overgrown trees and a rusted iron gate, it seemed almost like a secret. The photos didn't do it justice. The house had an old charm, like something out of a ghost story. Spires and intricate windows, ivy crawling up its stone walls. There was a certain energy in the photos that pulled Elliot in. The listing didn't reveal much, only that it was abandoned for years, and the price was surprisingly low. Elliot couldn't resist. He showed the listing to his wife, Claire. "What do you think?" he asked with a glint of excitement in his eyes. Claire was cautious. "It looks a little too old. And why is it so cheap?" "It's unique. Imagine what we could do with it. It'll be our peaceful escape from the busy life we've built." "We need something like this," Elliot replied with confidence. Despite her doubts, Claire agreed. She trusted Elliot's instincts, and she loved the idea of a quiet retreat away from the city. The family packed their bags and set off the next weekend to visit the property. As they approached the house, it stood tall and imposing against the stormy sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. The wind howled through the trees, and the house seemed almost to whisper secrets in the breeze. The gate creaked open with a long, eerie sound as they drove in. There was a heaviness in the air, but the family was too excited to notice. When they stepped inside, the house was cold and dark, but full of character. The walls were lined with intricate wooden panels, and the marble floors gleamed despite their age. Claire smiled, feeling a connection to the place, but there was something off about it, a strange, almost unnatural stillness. The grand staircase curled upward, the banister gleaming with polished wood. The large windows let in just enough light to illuminate the dark corners, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was beautiful, but in an unsettling way. Elliot was thrilled. "This is it," he said with a grin. "This is our new home." The family settled in, and for the first few days, everything seemed perfect. The kids ran through the large halls, playing and laughing. Claire spent her days arranging furniture and unpacking boxes. Elliot found peace in the quiet, away from the busy life he'd known. But as the days went on, a sense of unease began to grow. It started small, subtle, like a shadow out of the corner of their eyes, or a faint noise that couldn't quite be explained. But then it grew. At night, the house seemed to come alive. The wind howled louder, and the creaks in the walls grew more pronounced. Sometimes, Claire would wake in the middle of the night and feel the coldest chill, as if someone was standing right next to her. The air would feel thick, like a presence was there, watching her. One night, it was too much. Claire woke up with her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving around the house. But when she opened her eyes, there was no one there. The darkness seemed to press in on her from all sides. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just her imagination, but the fear wouldn't go away. The next day, Elliot noticed something even stranger. As he was walking through the hallway, he felt a strange tingling sensation on the back of his neck. When he turned around, no one was there, but the feeling lingered like someone had been watching him. He shrugged it off, thinking it was just the eerie atmosphere of the old house. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Later that week, strange things started happening. Claire was in the kitchen when she heard the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. She rushed into the living room and found that a glass vase had fallen from the mantel, shattering on the floor. But no one had been near it. It was as if the vase had just fallen on its own. That evening, Elliot was sitting in his study, going over some paperwork. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Suddenly, he heard a soft whisper. "Elliot." He froze. The voice was soft, almost melodic, but it was unmistakably a whisper. He spun around, but there was no one in the room. The door was closed, and the house was eerily silent. His heart raced. "Claire," he called, but she didn't answer. The whispering continued, growing louder and more frantic. It seemed to come from every direction at once. The room felt colder, and Elliot's breath became visible in the air. He stood up, feeling a deep sense of dread settle in his chest. What was happening? That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. The house seemed to come alive with strange noises, scraping sounds, faint footsteps in the halls, and the sound of something dragging across the floor. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the presence of something in the dark. His mind raced with thoughts of whether they had made a mistake by moving here. What was going on? It wasn't just the noises that troubled Elliot. He began to feel like someone was following him, watching him. Every time he stepped outside, it felt as though eyes were on him, peering from behind the curtains or hidden in the shadows of the trees. He tried to shake it off, but the feeling never left. Then one morning, it got worse. Elliot was walking to the garden when he noticed something strange. There, at the edge of the woods, he saw a figure standing in the distance. It was a tall shadow, too far to make out clearly, but it was there, watching him. His heart pounded in his chest. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, staring. Suddenly, Elliot felt the ground beneath him tremble. The air turned cold, and the figure vanished. He was left standing there, feeling more lost and confused than ever. As the days went on, the presence in the house grew stronger, more intense. Claire was becoming more frightened, and the children were having nightmares. One night, their daughter, Lily, came running to them, crying hysterically. She claimed she had seen a woman in the hallway, a pale, ghostly figure that had smiled at her before disappearing into the wall. Elliot knew he had to do something. But what? What was happening in this house? The house was filled with mystery, and every day that passed, he felt like they were getting closer to uncovering something far darker than he had ever imagined. That evening, while lying awake in bed, Elliot heard it again, the whisper. But this time it wasn't just his name. It was a warning. Leave. Elliot's heart pounded as fear gripped him. What was it? And why did it want him to leave? Suddenly he knew. The house was hiding something dangerous. And it wasn't just the house that was haunted. Whatever was here was following him, watching him every moment. And Elliot had to figure out what it wanted before it was too late. The whispers grew louder, more persistent, and the air in the house grew colder with each passing night. Elliot could no longer ignore the strange events unfolding around him. Something in this house wanted them gone, but he wasn't ready to leave, not without answers. He had to find out what was going on. One evening, as he sat in his study going through old records and documents about the house, he heard a soft knock on the door. It startled him, and he quickly opened it, expecting to find Claire or one of the children. But instead, there was a stranger standing in the doorway. A man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his face hidden by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir," the man said in a low voice, "but I know what's happening in your house." Elliot's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" he asked, but the man simply stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Please," the man said in a hurried tone, glancing over his shoulder nervously, "there's no time to explain. But you need to understand something. This house is cursed. You've awoken something dark by moving here." Elliot's confusion only deepened. "What do you mean?" "I need answers, not riddles." The man sighed, clearly agitated. "I don't have much time. You've already felt it, haven't you? The cold spots, the whispers, the feeling of being watched." He paused for a moment, his eyes darting nervously. This house wasn't built by ordinary hands. There's something evil trapped here, and it's been waiting for someone to open the door. Elliot didn't understand, but his unease grew. He stepped aside and motioned for the man to continue. "The house was built a century ago by a man named Jonathan Harker," the stranger explained. "He was a wealthy landowner, but he was also involved in dark rituals. He thought he could trap the souls of the dead here to keep them from passing on. The house itself is a prison for these restless spirits." Elliot's head spun. Was this some sort of sick joke? The man seemed to sense his doubt. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've been watching this house for years. People come, and then they disappear. The house traps them, feeds off their fear. I'm the only one who knows how to stop it, but I can't do it alone." Elliot's mind raced. He wanted to believe the man, but it all seemed so unreal. But then, he remembered the things he had seen. Claire's fear, the cold air, the whispers in the dark, and his doubts started to fade. "What do we have to do?" Elliot asked, his voice filled with desperation. The man's eyes locked onto Elliot's. "There's a hidden door beneath the house, a door that leads to the heart of the house's curse. It must be opened and destroyed. If you don't, it will continue to grow stronger, and eventually, it will claim you and your family." Elliot didn't hesitate. "Where is it?" he demanded. The stranger gave him a grave look. "It's in the basement, behind the old mirror. But be warned, once you open it, there's no going back." Elliot knew what he had to do. He could no longer ignore the horrors of this house. He grabbed a flashlight, and together with the stranger, they hurried to the basement. The air in the basement was thick and oppressive. The usual faint whispers were now louder, more frantic, like the walls themselves were trying to warn them to turn back. They reached the old mirror, its surface cracked and covered in a layer of dust. Elliot's heart pounded as he moved closer, his breath growing heavy in the freezing air. He touched the mirror, and to his surprise, it shifted under his fingers, revealing a hidden door behind it. As he pulled the door open, a gust of cold air rushed past them, as though something was trying to escape. Elliot's flashlight flickered as they stepped into the dark room beyond. The walls were lined with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. In the center of the room was a large stone altar, and surrounding it were piles of old, dusty books and torn papers. "This is it," the man said, his voice barely a whisper. "This is where it all began." Elliot's mind raced as he looked around. He needed to destroy whatever was here, but the air felt so heavy, so full of darkness that he could barely breathe. As they approached the altar, Elliot noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. A figure standing in the corner of the room. It was his son, Jake. "Jake!" Elliot cried out, rushing toward him. But as he got closer, he saw that his son was pale, his eyes wide with terror, and he was covered in bruises. It was as if he had been trapped here, hurt by something he couldn't see. "Dad," Jake whispered weakly, his voice trembling. They made me come here. I couldn't stop it." Elliot's heart broke as he knelt down beside his son. The room seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and Elliot realized that this was what had been tormenting his family all along. The spirits, the darkness, had taken Jake to use him as a pawn. The curse had been feeding off his fear, and it wasn't finished yet. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the walls seemed to close in around them. Elliot heard a growl, low and menacing, coming from the shadows. Before he could react, the mirror behind them began to glow. A shadowy figure appeared within it, tall, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The house's curse, the evil presence that had trapped so many souls, was taking form. "We need to get out of here," the stranger shouted. "Now!" Elliot didn't need any more convincing. He grabbed Jake in his arms and rushed toward the door, but the shadows seemed to grab at them, pulling them back. Elliot's pulse pounded in his ears as he pushed forward, his legs moving faster than they ever had before. The mirror behind them cracked, its surface fracturing as if something powerful was trying to break free. They made it back to the stairs, but the house seemed to fight them every step of the way. The walls shook and the lights flickered. Elliot's heart was in his throat, but he didn't stop running. Just as they reached the front door, the shadowy figure lunged at them, but the door slammed shut just in time, locking them out of the house. The house stood before them, silent once more. But Elliot knew something had changed. The curse was not gone. Not yet, but they had bought themselves some time. He looked down at his son, who was still shaking but alive. Claire and their daughter, Lily, rushed to them, crying in relief. The stranger, who had helped them, gave Elliot one last look before turning away. "I won't be around to help again. But remember, the house is never truly empty. You can leave, but it will always be watching." With that, the man vanished into the night, leaving Elliot and his family to wonder if they were truly safe. As they drove away from the house, Elliot couldn't help but look back one last time. The house, standing tall against the dark sky, seemed to be waiting for them to return. But this time, Elliot would be ready. He wouldn't let it take his family again, not if he could help it.